This is NDTV. And you're watching NDTV Prime. In association with Micromax. Nothing like anything.
Good evening, everybody. First of all, I can just say thank you for inviting me here. It's a great honor to be part of the MCHI CREDAI AGM. The most important aspect of real estate business infrastructure is the need for capital, is the need for financing, because this is not a 6-month, 12-month business. It's a 5-year business. It's a long gestation business. So today, with my eminent panel here, which I am going to introduce to you, I'm sure everyone knows all of them, but yet another round of introduction. We will basically look at how do you get over that big hump of getting the required capital that you need to grow real estate business in this country. A home is required for everybody. If 40% of India's population is going to live in cities, then cities need the largest number of homes, and we have to make sure that everybody has that as well. So, starting from my immediate left, Anuj Puri, Chairman and Country Head, JLL India. Next, Mr. S. Srinivasan, CEO Real Estate Fund Investment, Kotak Mahindra Bank. Vimal Shah, President, MCHI CREDAI. Neeraj Bansal, Head Real Estate and Construction, KPMG. And Mr. S. Rangan, CFO, Housing Development, HDFC. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being here. First, Mr. Shah, the question goes to you. So what are the issues? You have some bankers sitting next to you. Why is the money not coming, or why isn't enough money coming?
The real problem is that the banking sector has treated real estate as a speculative sector and not a necessity. And successively, every directive which comes from the banks, I mean central bank, makes lending to real estate more and more difficult. The norm of affordable housing is so pathetically low that it doesn't apply to majority of the metro cities.
Now with 60 lakhs, RBI actually raising
60 lakhs, nothing.
Okay.
I mean,
it's not
enough for the metro cities. So with this kind of atmosphere, or not considering it as a necessity and instead of taking it as a speculative, and then there are reports which come up every now and then which are unauthenticated but widely published, that there are millions of homes lying vacant, which sends jittery down the bankers that we can't fund this. But these are the issues which really need to be looked at. And the short-term funding available for a real estate. There is no long-term funding available. Real estate fundings are generally real estate land purchase are funded by long-term funds. But here, because banks don't want to lead it, the mutual funds which have repayment requirements after 3 years and 4 years, they are lending it, and they need exit at some point of time. All this is leading to paucity of the right funds, and is leading to more and more complications of doing business, because short-term funds deployed on a long-term projects, no coming out, permissions not coming in time, all these are not instituted.
So there's a capital mismatch. You know, it's interesting, Mr. Srinivasan, you need to come in here and explain this to me. Globally, you have 20 to 25% of any bank's portfolio going towards real estate, right? In Reserve Bank of India has actually given bankers a limit of 15%, but most bankers are 5% or below. Why is that? Why? So it makes me believe, and for once side with the developer here, to say, why is there so much of, you know, hesitancy when it comes to lending to real estate?
See, I think when you look at the global comparison, it really doesn't apply to India, because the bulk of the real estate exposure in global markets is for stabilized assets, as you know, literally loan against fully built up properties. Whereas what we have in India is a shortage of capital for development assets, and development by itself has far more risks than fully developed income producing assets. And what one has seen in the past is that if you look at the traditional banking sector, where today capital is available at, depending upon the credit quality of the borrower, between 12 and 14 or 15%. That kind of return, to be honest, just doesn't cut it from a risk reward perspective. I mean, Vimal had talked about it. You buy land, just getting the land cleaned up, aggregated, then getting the conversions done, then getting the entitlements, then you're getting the approvals. The risks are so high. These are in the nature of equity risks, and equity cannot be given at 14%. So the moment it becomes equity risk, the number will move up. I think to the point that Vimal was talking about, while there is capital available in India, most of the capital is expensive debt. And that is largely because I think the industry is going through I would say a maturity phenomenon. If you look at what happened in 2006 and 2008, but there is a lot of equity money that came in, and the blame is on both sides, both the developers as well as the investors. Equally so, there were some silly investment decisions that were done, and I don't blame the developers. If somebody wants to give away money for free without looking at the risk, it is the moral duty of our community to take the money.
All right. But clearly none of that free money is available anymore.
But that is, the fact is it happened, and some of the experiences were not good, and suddenly the whole industry moved to a debt structure. So now we have a situation where most of us who have capital are all saying we need 22%. It doesn't matter whether all the risks that I mentioned are there or not, because right now that's the only source of capital. So the pendulum has swung the other way. So even if land is already there, plan sanctions are there, approvals are there, sometimes even sales are there, investors are saying, I still need my 22%. I agree with you. I think the pendulum has swung the other way. I think there is a need today for equity capital in the industry.
Right.
And that is at this point in time just not available.
What is the big issue here? Why can't long-term capital come to real estate? Because as I said again, and I maintain again, they need to do their job. We need homes.
So Manisha, it's very clear that long-term capital is coming into India. So there's no doubt about it. If you look at commercial projects today, and these are income-producing commercial projects, the yield income of these about a year and a half ago was 12%. It's come down to 11, 10. It's now in single digit. That clearly shows that there's a huge amount of interest from overseas capital coming into India and investing into yield-based assets. The trouble is that they don't understand the risk. And that's the reason why they are not putting as equity, they are wanting it as debt. Because if you take away the risk, and in commercial assets, income yielding, you take away the risk, they are happy. They are bending backwards and fighting with each other to buy those projects. Ask Srini, there's a huge amount of competition built by foreign sovereign funds, pension funds, European funds, American funds who are wanting to come in and buy completed assets in India. So there is no dearth of capital. It's not that India has lost its sheen. It is very much up there. I just feel is that the real estate sector itself has to go through a phase of transparency. We're still very low in that transparency. The lack of transparency is also coming from the regulator, from the government, from the policies, from the approval. I don't think so. It is only lack of transparency from the developer. Okay. And I can tell you 90% of the issues that have come up with the private equity haven't been because of the developer. It's just that the approval process has either taken so much more longer time or that it has not just gone through. And genuinely.
How do you actually bridge this gap between what the industry needs and what are the sources of funds? You have banks, you have PE investors, you have debt money in other forms which can come in. And if you put it all together, how does real estate get less dependent on the consumer money and more dependent on the financing money, whether it's NBFCs, all of those?
No, I'll answer it in a different perspective. One is, I think, as any industry, as any business unit, I think one need to understand the capital structure. I mean, at the end of the day, there is a capital structure which has to be built into the business model. And as rightly mentioned in the the earlier round of arguments, that the capital structure has somehow we have never been able to develop a capital structure for the real estate industry.
What according to you is required to build that capital funding structure? What's missing right now? Because you are part of that ecosystem.
So what is required is essentially, obviously the builder needs to bring in, besides the land, pure land, certain amount of equity in the project. Which today
now you need to not only bring land, you need to bring more equity.
The land is a historical actually. So what is happening is, at today's terms, when you are actually funding a project, you have an historical land which is available, but more than that, you will also need a certain working capital to start with, which largely the builders have been depending upon the customers. So that is how the working capital and the initial capital has been built into the whole project scenario.